Hello, welcome to the Tri-State Warbird Museum located in Batavia, Ohio. What you're about to see is part of a series of interviews with World War II veterans and is made possible through the Northern Cable Television Mini-Grant Program. These interviews are a collaborative effort between the History Department at Northern Kentucky University and the Tri-State Warbird Museum. I'm Roger Hansen, the marketing coordinator at the museum. My guest today is Cliff Dornette. Mr. Dornette was a B-25 pilot during the Second World War, flying in the CVI, the China, Burma, India theater of operations. Mr. Dornette, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Why don't we begin at the very beginning? You were born where?
In Cincinnati.
And were you a lifelong aviation enthusiast?
No, I never knew anything about airplanes or had anything to do with them until I joined the cadets at the beginning, the first part of World War II.
And what prompted you to become an aviation cadet?
I just general talk in the area. People, how great it was to be a pilot and all that sort of thing. And I didn't know anything about it, but I signed up for it and took the mental and physical exam to get in the cadet program and passed them. So now on the written part. They ask on different subjects, math and history and all sorts of things. One was on aviation, and that part I failed because I didn't know anything about it. And one of the questions I remember was, what airplane was named after General Billy Mitchell? And I had no idea what it was.
And you ended up flying that?
Yeah, that's what we ended up with.
For your training, where did you go from Cincinnati?
In the Texas Command. It was based out of San Antonio. And I flew at different fields in Texas till we graduated. And we were in the first class that flew B-25s in advanced, as opposed to the old advanced trainers. And so when we graduated, we got a rating as a regular B-25 pilot, and we had all our twin engine time in them. Okay. We actually, the class that I was in had more time flying B-25s than our instructors did.
I'll be darned. What airplanes did you fly as part of your training syllabus?
What was it?
The kinds of airplanes that you flew in the training command?
I PT-19 and the original primary training. Then we went to the old BT-13s for the basic training. And then halfway through that, we switched over to an old twin-engine trainer and took the last half of basic and a twin engine. Then for advanced training, the final section, we went to Brooksfield in San Antonio and flew B-25s.
Of the airplanes you flew, which one was your favorite?
Of all, the whole time.
Of the whole time.
The A-26, which came out right at the end of the war. We were in a process in our squadron of transferring from B-25 to the A-26 to be used in the invasion of Japan when they dropped the atom bomb, and that stopped it all. So we never did fly it in combat.
Let's go back to training for just a minute. You didn't have very much aviation knowledge going in.
No.
During the ground school, the pre-flight portion, what kinds of courses were covered and subjects offered and things like that? Oh,
they were. We had on weather and on basic things that make airplanes fly, how the wind goes, the basic information about an airplane and how it operates, and weather, largely on weather, and some and radio training. Some, although the planes we flew in primary did not have radios.
You finished your training in B-25s.
Yeah. In
Texas. Did you go straight overseas from there?
No. At that point, you were just cleared to fly the airplane. Then we went to, in my case, Columbia, South Carolina, where we were assigned a full crew. And then we had airplanes that were equipped with guns and everything at that point. And we trained for, I guess, 60 days as a crew, doing not necessarily with how the airplane operated, but learning how to fire the guns and how the tail gunner could fire his guns and the radio operator could run the radios, the navigator. And we flew various types of missions, low level and high level and long range in training.
So you'd gotten together with
your... Which was standard. That was standard. Everybody did that.
So you'd gotten together with your crew, and you'd gone through some sort of crew training, and then what happened?
Then we went overseas.
Did you fly over?
No, the B-25s couldn't handle that distance, so we went over on a transport plane over to India, and then we did. And then we got to India, we got to a pool that all the flight crews were in, no matter what kind of plane they flew, and they were assigned out to outfits as needed then.
And you ended up with the 11th Bomb Group, I believe, right?
Yeah, and which was based entirely in China.
What was China like in 1943, 44?
Well, where we were, where the Americans were, was very rural. The main base in China, Kunming, where everybody landed when they, no matter what kind of plane, when you came into China, you went to Kunming. And ironically, in 1939, a survey crew of the U.S. Navy came there, and they settled that was where they have the base. And they had never seen a white person in that area before. It was the first time any of those Chinamen had ever seen her. That was so far inland and so remote, they didn't even know what was going on out on the coast.
What were the living conditions like?
Well, they weren't too bad. They had, by the time I got there now, we'd been in the war for over a year, and they had, at that area, we had huts built. I probably shouldn't say it, but I didn't think at the time, but most everything we had on the main bases had beautiful red tile roofs, those curvy kinds. We found out later that the general was married to a Chinese woman whose family owned a tile factory. That was Chenault. That was Claire Chenault, who everybody knew. We had the original Flying Tigers. Yeah, maybe you shouldn't put that on the air.
Claire Chenault, for anybody who doesn't know, was a retired American Air Force officer who was hired by the Chinese government, Chiang Kai-shek, and essentially started the Chinese Air Force and recruited something on the order of 100 American pilots, brought some P-40 airplanes over. They became the AVG, the American Volunteer Group, better known as the Flying Tigers. After the war began, the Flying Tigers were then mostly assimilated into the Army Air Corps. A little bit of history for somebody who might not know. The food. Did you eat American food, Chinese food?
Well, mostly shipped in, but it was very difficult. Everything at that point, up till just before the atom bomb, had to be brought in by air. We had no ground connection at all. So they flew in what they had to, but we didn't really have that great of a food like most places had. And we got what we could locally.
How many missions did you fly?
24, which was waiting weeks between missions because we didn't, either we were low on gas or we were low on ammunition or and the planes that would bring the like the gasoline, they had B-24s modified with the bomb bay made into a big gas tank to bring gasoline in, and they had to take half of the gas they brought in to fly back to India. So we were always short. We never pre-flighted like they had to do. It did take a long. That's the reason, as long as I was over there, I only got in 24 missions because we spent so much time waiting with no. We were either short of something or other.
24 missions. What was an average mission like? Take us through waking up in the morning to when you got back from the conclusion.
Oh, our missions, the main mission, main way, we would usually be a 12-plane mission, and we'd take off early in the morning, but we'd fly as a formation to an encampment or whatever they were after, and then we would medium bomb that normally from around 10,000 feet, and then we would split up, and maybe two of us would go down a river, and a couple more would go up a railway or a roadway, whatever was available where we were. And we did all low-level work then, all mostly strafing and did that sort of thing mainly. Most of our time we spent separate. Quite a few of the times I was all alone. I remember once we were flying the same way there were the only airplanes that were really operational to anything over there were the original P-40s, and then they had the P-51s and us. And I know we were flying along going down the river, and the tail gunner said, "There's a P-51 coming in toward us." He said, "What do we do?" He said, "If it gets close enough, shoot." Because that was a standard procedure. Well, naturally, he knew that. And he saw us and didn't know what we were, and he came in. But when he got in fairly close, he came sideways, and he just kind of slid a little bit sideways in, and he flew alongside of us for maybe 5 minutes, and then he peeled off and went on his way. He just wanted to make sure what it was. Like we were, but all the while he was doing it, our guys had the guns at him just in case, and he knew that. But
so you'd wake up at the same time? Were the missions scheduled for different times of day?
Mostly the same time, Johnny. Because well, to begin with, by the time I got overseas, the first day I was in China in Kunming there was an air raid. And that was the last air raid that the Japanese ever performed in China. The aircraft were forced out by them. And all of our action and all of our losses or whatever they had were all from ground fire. We had never saw an enemy airplane. There was never anywhere in China.
And probably didn't want to very much.
They were out by then. That was the last mission they ever tried, and they failed that mission. They missed the town and dropped the bomb short, but they never tried again because we had such superiority then. If a flight had come in, they'd have been pounced on by P-51s and never made it. But
is there a mission that stands out in your mind?
Well, I did most of our flying out of a little forward field, which was a gravel runway alongside of the river, and we lived in tents. And the whole field was 12 B-25s and 12 P-51s. And that's all was there. And we had to get our gas at another field about 30 or 40 miles back away from the front lines. So when you come back from a mission, if everything was okay, you'd go back to that field, fill the tanks, and then come back to our field. We had no supply of gas on the field, and I flew most of the missions there, and that was where we did some good and were.
But again, is there one mission that you remember that stands out in your mind as either being especially hazardous or perhaps especially effective?
Well, I don't know. One mission down in Indochina, I know that was the only mission where we got flak from anti-aircraft guns, and it exploded just below the airplane between the right engine and the body, and the pieces came up, and pieces went through the engine and took all the fins, the cooling fins, but missed the piston. And we had a steel plate on our planes on the side of the plane to protect the compartment where the people were, and something could have come in through the window above it, but it was below, so we never got anything except the engineer. He operated the top turret, and that was mounted with a saddle, just like a bicycle saddle, a steel plate with a padding on it. And a piece came up through the bottom of the plane and hit the saddle, and I killed the momentum of it, but it made it red hot. And he got burnt.
Did he receive the Purple Heart for that?
Huh?
Did he get the Purple Heart for that?
Yeah,
he did. Okay.
Yeah, but he was a real religious guy and would never do anything, would never go around or drink or anything. But he says, "I'm going to go into town. I'm not going home until I find out if everything's working right."
and we don't need to know, but we can hope that everything worked right.
He's the guy I talked to lately, yeah.
Tell us that story. We talked about it prior to the interview beginning.
The what?
The story of how you have remained in touch really with none of your crew members or squadron mates, but the one fellow got in touch with you just a couple of years ago.
I never heard of any kind of reunion of our outfit. And about 2 years ago, I got a call from this same fellow who was the engineer, and he had been contacting everybody on our crew, and he said, every one of them is dead but you and me. So 2 years ago, our whole crew had been dead.
And that was a 5 or a 6-man crew?
Well, it was 6 men if they all went, but a lot of times we didn't need a whole crew. Different models and
Missions and so forth. Yeah.
We kind of began with, we didn't have a tail gun in some of the planes. Didn't even have one.
Reader's Digest.
Do what?
Reader's Digest.
Oh.
Humor in uniform. Those of us who have been in the service know that some of the funniest things in the whole world happen in the service. Do you have a humor in uniform story for us?
Oh, well, I don't know.
That you can tell.
I can't think of anything particularly funny. I don't know. Really, I don't know of anything special.
Okay. How about the again, Reader's Digest, my most unforgettable character?
Well, I don't know. He might have been my navigator, just because I knew him and he did a lot. Then I say when at our home base, it was, my roommate was a navigator, but not on my crew, and he was shot down. Now, he was a really great guy, and he had completed his 50 missions and was waiting to go home, and it was down in Hanoi on the outside of Hanoi, the Palma Bridge, and he was the only navigator we knew that could find it. And he had a lot of experience, because I say we didn't have proper maps or anything at that time of an area like Hanoi. And the colonel talked him into flying one more mission to take him down to that bridge. And they were shot down on the bridge. They were the real dangerous missions. When you got to the bridge, you had to make a dive in right over the bridge and up. Well, they had 2 guns on both ends. And no matter how you maneuvered, when you made the run, you had to make it straight down in. And there were 2 planes on that mission, and the other plane said they were circling around to go in, and they saw it start in, and they saw it flip upside down, and it just crashed right in at the edge of the bridge. Didn't even hit the bridge.
Of the 24 missions, how many of them were against transportation, which was I'm given to understand, a very, very important target? Trucks, rail, bridges.
Yeah, but almost all of them were part of the time. I say we would medium bomb some spot, then we would all split up, and we would work the roads or the railroads or the rivers for whatever you could find, what they call targets of opportunity.
And you were looking for troop concentrations or truck traffic?
Yeah, whatever you could find. One thing you said about, I shouldn't probably say it, but the colonel, our commanding officer, he would pick he flew a lot of missions, and he would pick one of the crews, and you'd fly as co-pilot, and he'd fly the plane. But he had an obsession when he'd go to make a strafing run, he would have flown right in the ground if he. So two things. One, when you fire those 50 calibers, anybody that knew, you can only give bursts with them. If you goes over 5 seconds, it burns the barrels out. And he'd burn the barrels out on the first drive. But maybe it did, and you'd see the tracer bullets when they'd fire them, you'd see them all those circles going out the front because the barrels were all burned out. But maybe if you were strafing general, it probably did just as well. But he would, and the crew all said, "Oh, be sure to grab that wheel." He would do it like that, headed in toward the ground, strafing, and at the last minute he'd let go, and then you'd have to peel it up. And everybody was afraid he would never let go soon enough. And they said, "When it gets too close, grab the wheel." But he would let up, and so he would just go like that, and then you'd pull it off. But he just couldn't stop. He would have gone right in the ground if he'd been alone.
That's what we called a tiger, I think.
Oh yeah, he was real. He was a West Pointer. He was a real military man.
There was a movie made years ago with Steve McQueen called The War Lover. And the plot line was he was a B-17 pilot in England and loved the war, loved the fighting. Did you have guys like that, or were most of them just trying to...
Some were like that, 1 or 2. We had one fella, he got off of Hanoi and he got out over to get out over the ocean. Well, I never did get over the ocean, but he did on that one mission, and he saw a destroyer, You know, a B-25 is not much of a shooting 50 calibers is not much of a competition to a destroyer. He dove on it, and he started in. They hit him, and he lost an engine. He went ahead and did the strafing run with one engine. He fettered it and just kept on going for all he had. Put the throttle all the way forward on the other engine and went ahead with his strafing run. And he made it back he did get back to friendly territory. But he's the only guy I ever knew would do something like that. But he was always that way. He was known. He would never stop from doing anything if he could do it.
The war ended with the dropping of the atomic bombs on Japan. From that time to when you got back to the States, how long a period of time?
Oh, a couple of months. We had to wait a little while, and so they asked us. They said we got to get stuff moved out to the coast now that we occupy the whole area, and they said we want you to fly, you being our group, to fly C-46s and take stuff out, which we did. And I made 2 trips to Shanghai and 1 to Peking, and the C-46 hauling stuff out. And there was more to talk about on that. On one of those flights, we went to Chongqing, which was the capital during the war, and we flew a plane load of wax out to Shanghai, and nobody had ever seen any wax anywhere except they were in that headquarters building, and we took them out the coast before the Navy actually got into Shanghai to occupy it. But it was good. I don't know. We must have had 50 of them on board with a lieutenant in charge, and of course this was a cargo plane, and we didn't no sooner get in the air. And it was about a 4.5-hour flight. We no sooner got in the air, and the sergeant comes. She says, "I got some girls got to go. Where do they go?" And they said, "They're in any place." She said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "Well, you can do what we have to do." The crew chief, I don't know how he took a blanket or something and the tail of the plane, pinned it across, and we just put a bucket behind it. That's what you'll have to use. Well, they did. I guess they were pretty well used to unusual conditions, and it worked all right.
You got back home. Did you then pick up your life where you'd left it off, back to school? What was your...
I stayed in for about 6 months, and then I got out, and then I got a job. Of course, I was married. We got married when I went overseas, and while I was over there, while I was in China, we had a son born. My oldest son was born at that point. So when the war was over, I had a wife and a child. So it was no fooling around having a good time. It was get a job and get established, which is what I did.
And you continued flying after you got out of the service?
Yeah. Well, about 1950, I bought a little plane and flew it around for a little while. Then I had a chance to get in on ownership with a Bonanza, Beach Bonanza, which was what's still about the best single-engine plane you can get. Incidentally, Bonanza, there was a Russian trainer, a primary trainer, that was put in production just before the Bonanza, and they still make it. And other than that, Bonanza is the longest production of any airplane anywhere, any type of plane at all. It's been since 1950. It's been in continuous production. They still make them today. They're a lot better than they were then, but they still make the Bonanzas.
Do you still fly at all anymore?
No, not since we sold the Bonanza about 8 or 9 years ago.
You got out of the service, raised a family, successful businessman. Given the wisdom of experience and years, what one thought would you share with our country today?
Well, the people in that era were willing to do what was necessary to help the country, and I don't see that prevalent today. We were happy to get in the Army. our family was happy to see us get in the Army. And Tom can tell you that. But you don't see that today. I say you have to draft them to get somebody. And it's just a different way things go. Of course, we had a war then going on, which meant the civilians lived a different life then too, so they appreciated it. Today they don't seem to have that as much anyway.
Well, unfortunately, the clock is our enemy today, and Cliff Dornette, thank you so very much for being with us, sharing your stories and your experiences. From the Tri-State Warbird Museum, I'm Roger Hansen, thanking you for joining us today as we visited with Cliff Dornette, World War II veteran and B-25 pilot. Thank you.